Hello and welcome to Sensitive Changemakers, the podcast where we celebrate the power of sensitivity and introversion in leadership, entrepreneurship and beyond. I'm Kate Carter, your host, a certified professional coach, HSP and introvert who's passionate about helping you embrace your unique gifts and lead with authenticity. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Sensitive Changemakers. I hope this episode finds you well. I am always excited to have guests on the show, and this one is absolutely no exception. I am so honoured to introduce Dr. Katie T. Larson, who is a hypnotherapist, growth coach and somatic practitioner who works with highly sensitive people, empaths and intuitives. She has helped initiate meaningful personal growth in thousands of individuals, but she is best known for guiding clients through quests, inner journeys, which we're going to be digging into later, that offer opportunities to explore your life from deeper perspectives, bringing more purpose, meaning and joy. And you can tell by that bio that she is made for this podcast. And I know that we're going to have a wonderful conversation. Katie, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you would like to add to that bio before we start?
Oh no, that's perfect. Oh, and then I enjoy tea.
Yes.
Kate and I bonded about this right away. I said, don't worry, I appreciate a good Yorkshire tea.
Yes. And then
yes, Kate, that was a wonderful intro.
Oh, thank you. That was, yes, tea, definitely. And we were just talking about the difference between kettles, and obviously kettles are not as common over in the US as they are over here. And so a lot of you Americans boil, or should I say, it is boiling in a way, isn't it? Boil their tea through a microwave.
Yes, I do not. I want to be clear to the listeners, I do not microwave my tea. Yes, I'm a kettle girl.
Yes. I love that. It's such a wonderful thing. And it's Yorkshire tea, people, just in case you're interested.
Yes, it's correct. Yorkshire is the only way to go.
Absolutely. So, Katie, I would really love to hear more about how you got, because I know yours has been quite the journey as well to get to where you are. Would you like to kind of expand on that? How have you navigated your way to where you are today?
Yeah, it's funny whenever I'm asked this, I remember I used to teach a workshop that you would say like, okay, we're going to tell your life story. Then you would tell your life story. And then you would say, okay, now we're going to tell your life story, but make it a drama. And now we're going to tell your life story, but make it a comedy. Right. And so there's always different ways to tell your life story. So I'll choose maybe a dramedy, a little bit of drama, a little bit of comedy in this telling. But basically I was born and raised in the Chicago area in the United States. And I was, as a highly sensitive kid, similar to a lot of us, like a seeker by birth. I think I've always had that inner longing, that inner craving to understand the depth of the world. And I think maybe that's just us as highly sensitive kids, right? Where I was like, if I wasn't in the library going through the Loch Ness Monster books and the Bigfoot books and the UFO, all of these anomalous books, I loved all of that concept. I was literally outside in my backyard, like exploring the world and creating little paths in the woods by myself back when we used to be free range kids, right? And a lot of my excitement for the rest of the world, because I was, pretty much stable in one place as a child. But my excitement for the rest of the world came from National Geographic magazines. And my grandfather would lend me his old ones. And I got this really excited, desire to see the rest of the world from these magazines. And I didn't know what those people in the magazines did for a living. Like maybe they were photographers or writers or whatever, but I'm like, I want to be that. Mm-hmm. And that comes up later in my life. But because of my first love of seeking, I channeled that into a love of nature and biology, and I became a biologist and a biology and physical sciences teacher. So I used to teach high school in the Chicagoland area, and I loved it. I found that is my calling by nature, is I am an educator at heart. And so when we go into later all of these little side jobs that I've always done, it's the golden thread that really ties us all together is that I'm an educator. But that being an educator allowed me, in the United States, we have 3 months off in the summertime. And so for those 3 months, I would often travel internationally to get my National Geographic fix. And so I was a field biologist, meaning I would go out into exotic locales and like Borneo and Mongolia and Kenya. And I would actually be in the wild with different exotic animals doing actual biology. Like I would take a
Wow.
machete through the jungles in Borneo to get and find some macaque monkeys or some orangutans. I would have to track elephants in Kenya and like really do that National Geographic style
Mm.
work. And I felt so proud of myself for actually making that a reality as a younger adult, my first adulthood. And then during the rest of the year, I was a teacher and I taught science in Chicago, like I mentioned. And really what was going on internally for me was I just knew I had a place out in the wider world.
Mm.
I just had a knowing that I was meant to leave the United States. And, the summers were great, but I felt like, no, it was really time for me to spread my wings and like leave for a long time. So in 2011, my husband and I sold everything. It was very cliche and very like a movie trope. We
Yeah.
sold every last thing and we moved to Spain, to Barcelona, Spain. And from then, from 2011 to 2021, I was out in the world and I lived in
Wow.
several different countries. So I lived in Spain, South Africa, Singapore, Hong Kong. And then in between, I had like some jaunts all around the world into like these longer trips, like a backpacking trip through Asia and
Wow.
living in Cambodia, different places like this. And so all throughout that experience of choosing to move and live in different places, I honestly say I chose from my heart. My husband is the more logical, practical one. So
Yeah.
thank God. Thank God there's one of us that's like that because I'm like, let's go here. Let's go here. But as a combination, we work really well together because we made choices in our 30s where we just said yes to as many things as we possibly could because we didn't have children yet. And I really value those 10 years because while we were out in the world, I gained a lot of perspectives, especially Eastern perspectives, because I lived in Asia for about 8 years of that 10 years.
Mm.
I really learned a lot on how the rest of the world processes
Yes.
journeys. And during that time, I just happened to be enrolled in a program called Leadership and Change. It's a PhD in leadership and change. And I had gone into that PhD program for the leadership part
Yes.
because prior to moving all over the world, I was kind of on an upward trajectory in educational leadership. And I was hoping to teach teachers in academia. But after moving 10, billion times around the world, I kind of fell actually more into the change portion of
Yes.
that umbrella of like, oh my goodness, every time I move and every time I have to reestablish myself, I am pulling myself up through the roots and I am throwing myself into chaos and tumult. And there are very interesting things occurring within me as a result of this. And I told my mentor, what is that? Like, is there a study of that? And he said, yeah, that's called transformative learning. Look into it. And so transformative learning is actually what the doctor and Dr. Katie is what I have my expertise in. Transformative learning is the process that we go through when we change our perceptions of ourselves and the world. And most adults, believe it or not, don't go through it
Yes.
as much as they should. Because it's actually quite difficult, right? And so, like, learning how to do a new skill, easy. You just learn it. It's very easy to watch and mimic. Learning how to just read and think and those kind of skills, easy. We've done them our whole life. But learning how to change your
Mm.
opinion about yourself and about the world and actually critically reflect on those things, it's so difficult that sometimes we quit midway.
Mhm.
And so we can talk about that later. But that was what I was so focused on because I had to consistently reinvent myself and consistently re-understand what the
Mm.
world was like by moving so much and putting myself in different cultures. I thought, I want to study this from the ins and outs. And so really my study was quite multidisciplinary in the sense that I was well versed in everything from neurobiology to ancient mythology and everything in between. And so I understand the process of journey work in a different way than I say maybe a psychologist would.
Mhm.
And so after moving so many times, I actually had to return back to the United States during the pandemic. And it was during that time that so many of us were like grounded, right? Like we
Yes.
couldn't actually physically move. We were all stuck. And I missed journey work so much that I realized I actually want to go back to a process and a technique that I had back in 2009 that really influenced and changed my life forever which was hypnotherapy. And
Mm.
in hypnotherapy, I was able to travel to past lives and lives between lives back in 2009. And that's really changed my life. And so by being so grounded in 2020 and 2021, I got back into hypnotherapy to do inner journeys. We couldn't fly, we couldn't move around, but we could go inwards. You could be a
Mhm.
psychonaut, right? You could really go inside and understand yourself from the inside out. So I absolutely loved this work. And so I became a hypnotherapist at that time. And the latest aspect of my job that's really evolved as a result of the hypnotherapy and what occurs for my clients is the somatic work. So a
Mm.
lot of times when we're going within, we're uncovering some traumas or we're uncovering some memories and that kind of things. And those memories live in our bodies. And when we're finding them living in our bodies, sure, you can adjust them and you can approach them using energy and that kind of stuff. Actually, one of the most important ways to get them out of our body and to release those stored traumas and those stored emotions, etc., pain, discomfort, is moving the body. And so in 2024, I became certified as a somatic practitioner. And so altogether, I have a coaching, a hypnotherapy, and a somatic specialty that really emphasize inner journey work. And I know we're going to go into that more, but that's like me in a nutshell. There's a lot of twists and turns and a lot of the aspects of my life that I think people will probably remember the most is that it wasn't actually as stable
Mhm.
as I once thought it would be. When I was born and raised in one place, I actually became somebody who had very strong wings and took myself out in the world. And I'm now back in the United States trying my best to learn how to root again. And I'll tell you, it's actually quite challenging.
Yeah. I mean, just an amazing story
Thank you.
of, like you said, just experiencing not only different changes within you, but also that being mirrored in the different changing cultures that you were
Yes.
experiencing as well. So it's, I can imagine as a highly sensitive, that
Yes.
was a lot in itself to kind of navigate. And tell me if I'm wrong here, but it feels like that might have been at some points overwhelming's the wrong
Yeah,
word.
that's a good word. Yeah.
Do you think it's the right
Overstimulating is a
word?
good word.
Yeah,
Yes.
overstimulating, that's a better one. But just I can imagine I'm putting myself in that situation. I'd
I
be like,
know.
right, so I'm number one dealing with all of these different cultures that
Yes.
are so different to the way that I was brought up, and I can imagine the
Right.
Eastern culture, especially,
Yes.
I would imagine quite different to what you were
Mhm.
brought up to believe, and definitely what we're kind of Western society brought up to believe. And then also you had this kind of that mirror journey going on inside you, which was
Yes.
transformation and
I
change
think
and
you're 100% correct in terms of like having a stable childhood. Yes, I have some traumatic memories and stuff like that, but I had a very physically stable. I was in the same house for most of my life. I had a very predictable, quiet suburban upbringing. So I was not necessarily aware of the way my nervous system was as a child because it was so stable. And then when I was out living in busy, loud motorbikes passing every 2 seconds Barcelona, I was very easily triggered by noise. I remember that
mm,
was the first time I was like, noise is a thing, because
yeah.
cicadas was all I heard as a kid. And now I'm hearing motorbikes every 5 seconds. But it wasn't until I moved to Hong Kong that I really realized, oh, high sensitivity is a thing. Because there's this wonderful little place for anyone who's ever been to Hong Kong or lived there called Mongkok. And Mongkok is like the epitome of Hong Kong. Like it is like a million things coming at you at every set. There's smells, there's flashing lights, there's like it's the very dense area, there's traffic, and it's like those are a very high barrage on your nervous system. And I remember I had a 30-minute limit in Mongkok. Like a minute 31, I was like, I got to get out of here. And that really helped me understand what high sensitivity was because it was like I didn't read up on it until I was already living in Hong Kong. And then, of course, like everyone, when you go back and you reframe your whole childhood, and you
Yes.
reframe your whole young adulthood, and you realize, oh, that's why I had to leave the club in Barcelona at 3 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. like everyone else, right?
Yeah.
Because I was highly sensitive and the music was just too much at 3 a.m., which is adorable when all of us know that most of us now leave at like 10:30, right?
Yes,
But
absolutely. I'm in
when
bed by 9.
but also like this is why the smells are so intense for me in India, right? Or any the heat, etc. So like the understanding of my sensitivity probably arose as a result of my reactions to
Yeah.
going to so many different places and having these very visceral, very intense nervous system reactions.
Mm. How did you discover that you were highly sensitive? Was it a gradual thing? Was it something you discovered and then, like you said, you reframed looking back over your life? Like, how did you discover it?
It's actually a really cool story. Also, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was taking, and in Hong Kong, the pandemic started in January. So I think most of the rest of the world, the pandemic really hit hard in March of
Yes.
2020. But in Hong Kong, it was about January. And so in January of 2020, when everything started shutting down, like most people, I was like, I got to do something, like I got to do something with this found time. And so I started certifying to become a coach for spiritual emergence. And actually, I just want to touch on what that is really quickly in case any listeners are like, oh my gosh, that's me. Spiritual emergence is that phenomenon that so many of us are going through right now, where we feel as if we are awakening.
Mm.
We are awakening to something else. It does feel quite spiritual in nature. We're starting to be in on the cosmic joke. We're starting to know that there's more out there than reality that like meets the eye, right?
Mm.
So I started certifying to be a coach for people who are going through that because I feel like I myself has also gone through that. And when I was reading in the modules about something called peak experiences, which is something that my PhD really touched on, which is part of the transformation process that we can sometimes have that makes a big aha moment,
Mhm.
is something we call a peak experience. And a peak experience could be something like a ayahuasca experience or a near death experience or some like what I do now, past life regression. But a peak experience is one of those big moments in your life that then changes your perception about everything.
Mhm.
And in that module on peak experiences, it said highly sensitive people are more likely to experience peak experiences than less sensitive people. And highly sensitive people had a link. And I was
Mm.
like, what is a highly sensitive person? Right?
Yes.
Click on it. And then, like so many of us, I went down a click hole that was this explains my entire life.
Mhm.
I had known up until that point I was an empath, and I just put everything through the perspective of being an empath, but I hadn't understood the degree that a highly sensitive person also has such sensitivities with their nervous system
Yeah.
and can be such deep processors and
Mhm.
could be really amazing listeners and good friends and all of those wonderful parts of being highly sensitive. And at that moment, I also realized I'm a high sensation seeking, highly sensitive person,
Ooh.
meaning I really love stimuli until I don't, right?
Yes.
But I as a person, I fall less into the category of a cautious, highly sensitive person, and I fall more into the category of a high sensation seeking person. And I never thought that those were compatible until I
Mm.
started down that click hole and realized, oh, there's a lot of us that we want to feel alive. We chase peak experiences. And so, like the audience will recognize is once you find a framework that helps explain yourself, it is addicting to continue to read and read and read and read about it. And so I put like any good academic would, I put myself to the test to become an expert in high sensitivity so that I could use it going forward in my coaching practice and in other things that I've been doing.
Yes. And so there's a couple of questions that are coming up for me
Yeah,
here. One is, how does that play out in your business? Like, how has that changed how you support clients? I'll ask that one first and then we'll come back to the other
sure.
one. So, yeah.
I would say that about 85 to 90% of my clientele are highly sensitive. And so when I market myself now, I actually market myself only to the following three people: highly sensitive people, empaths, and intuitives, because I find I am those three, and therefore I work best with those three. What I had a really difficult time with in the beginning of my career, when all of us will just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what
Yes,
sticks, right?
absolutely.
Is I don't do well motivating someone who is less sensitive. I just
With you on
don't.
that one. Yes.
Yeah. And so I found, okay, completely, once 2020 hit, I completely shifted my niche to only working with highly sensitive people, empaths, and intuitives.
I'm thinking of like if you've ever read the Gay Hendricks book and The Zone of Genius, it feels like
Mhm.
all of the experiences you had have really just allowed you to hone in on
Good
what you
point.
know that you're amazing at and how you can help other people.
And adorably, the other 15% of who I work with are usually the partners of those people.
Oh,
So, like,
interesting.
they're the partners who sometimes their like wife or husband makes them see
Yes.
me. They'll be like, "Can you tell my husband that this is a real thing?" A lot of times, the people that thought they were not as sensitive and they're like, "I just don't understand her. She cries at everything." Then, when you go and you meet them where they're at, a lot of them are a lot more sensitive, but kind of were not given that opportunity to be that as a child.
Yes.
Right. And so then you're actually giving them a space to be held and seen for the sensitivity that they actually do have. And so I would say that a large majority of the 15% that are not HSP are partners of the
Yes.
HSP.
Yes. And the other question I had is going back to what you were talking about in terms of seeking those peaks, in terms of that being how the sensitivity sort of presented itself in you was constantly
Yeah.
searching those. And I just wondered if you could just kind of give some examples so that people
Yeah.
could relate to that. What did that look like for you?
I'm really grateful for that question because I think so much when we think of a highly sensitive person in like a stereotype, we often think of the cautious
Mm-hmm.
sensitivity, right? And by good, I think the cautiousness of the high sensitivity is very helpful, actually. My daughter has that. She's the cautious, highly sensitive, where she's watching everyone and before she partakes. Where myself, I am addicted probably to the dopamine, to be honest, but
Yes.
I'm addicted to the sensation of being alive. Right. And Joseph Campbell used to say that, like, really, people think we're seeking a meaning to life, but really, we're just seeking a sensation of being alive. And I find that for me, I tend to put myself in circumstances that ignite the senses that are already very alive. And so I will put myself in like a high risk situation where maybe I'm zip lining or I'm rock climbing or I'm skydiving. I'm looking for the adrenaline, I'm looking for the dopamine, I'm looking for the every single nerve firing experience, right? In terms of seeking, I want to do the mushrooms and I want to have a psychedelic experience where I'm really learning something meaningful and connected to the cosmic reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm doing these life between lives sessions or these quantum healing sessions where I'm in trance for like several hours and I'm connecting with my spirit guides and things like this because I want to really understand life from every dimension. I want to enter it from every dimension. And to be honest, I will say the spiritual aspect of that for me, my understanding, the framework that I understand of why I chase those things is that I understand that I had a choice to be alive, right? Like through the framework that I have explored as a result of those things, see that I chose to be in this body. I chose to be in this life at this time. And so I want to make it worth my while. I want to make my human experience feel like something. I want to really honor humanity. And one of the reasons that we came here in a human body is to feel like a human, feel in a body, feel all of these highs and unfortunately all of the lows. And I think that is, some of the examples that I would give. I have a lot more, but really it's just I chase. I'm a
Mm.
chaser of the next. And sometimes I feel like that's great because it gives you a very wide range of experiences to draw from. And then other times it's an addiction. So
Mm.
it's like understanding the difference between the two of like, am I searching this as a distraction because I need that next adrenaline kick? Or am I doing this because it's actually going to give me something that is meaningful for me? And there are times that I've had to say, no, no, you don't need to go to climb that mountain. You're fine. Like, like how about
Yeah.
you just fold the laundry and be okay with that part of being a human as well?
I love that
It's
little.
got its own mountain pile of laundry,
Yes,
right?
that never seems
Yeah.
to go down.
Yeah. It's the highest peak I've summited in a while.
I love that. And as you were talking, I got a real clear idea that, first of all, I don't think a lot of people see that in highly sensitives.
Yeah.
I think they see them as somebody withdrawn, shy,
Right.
doesn't like talking. And it got me thinking in a different kind of lens because the way that I saw that you were talking there, you were like very much seeking external
Yeah.
experiences, but also seeking internal
Yes.
understanding and meaning as well. And I think for me, and I'm explaining this just to see if anybody in the audience can relate to either you, Katie, or
Mhm.
maybe somewhere in between. So for me, I don't necessarily seek the adrenaline type thing. Is not me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't seek those, but the internal peaks, as you were
Yeah.
talking, I was like, yes, that's very much been me, and I do take risks
Internally.
internally, and those sort of
Yes.
and risks. I have a friend, and she sent me a text the other day, bless her. She went, I wish I was more like you. And I was like, why? And it's
Yeah.
because she sees me as a risk taker, somebody who does
Right.
things. And I was like, isn't that interesting? Because it's not necessarily how I see myself,
Yeah.
but it's just having that as you were talking, I was like, interesting that it may not, for people listening, it may not be, I mean, you may absolutely be the adrenaline person who's seeking
Right.
those kind of external highs, but you might be seeking those internal highs as well. And
And aren't
that's
both
interesting.
brave?
Yeah.
You know, they're both brave because they're just really being you. You're honoring you and like the side of you that needs that itch scratched. You know, like I think you would feel really bored if you didn't internally seek,
Mm,
right?
I
Like,
definitely
and for
would.
you, yeah. So, like, for you, the depths of your own self, that's brave to go even deeper. And then the next layer, and then the next layer. What's the next layer? Because we've all met someone who stays on the surface.
Hmm.
They don't have the bravery to go down, right? They might have the bravery to go up and be really externally seeking some kind of rush. But some of us don't have the bravery to face what is below the surface.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I did abseil down one of our schools when I was younger, though. That was,
Brilliant.
yes, something I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah, I know.
I
I've
think
often
that,
said that in the middle, but then it's too late.
yes, I'm down,
Like,
I'm
why did I
halfway
do this?
down.
Yeah, I've definitely been that person as well. I'm like, oh, I chose to do this. I got to follow through.
But I love that as well, coming back to that's what, thank you for reminding me, that choice aspect. And I do
Yeah.
feel like from a very young age, I would love to hear from highly sensitives if this is the same for you. But I definitely remember from a very early age being excited about being alive.
Yeah.
I was
Same.
very much aware that it was not to be taken for granted.
Yeah. Same.
And I remember when I was having my anxiety and panic disorder, and some of the doctors were saying I was depressed because I was so scared of dying. And I was like, no,
Mm,
I'm so excited to live that I don't want it to go away.
I
And I was like,
understand.
that's what I really, and so it's just so interesting to hear that choice aspect. And I would love to hear if other people feel the same there, that there
Yeah.
was that just that need for seek, that need for depth, that
Yeah.
need for like just I want to make the most of what I've got been given here.
And I remember too, like when you were saying, like, I told the doctors, like, I actually don't want it to go away. I remember distinctly when I was 7, dancing in my living room and like just loving the moment and sensation of dancing so freely. And I said to myself, never gonna forget
Yeah.
this. I'll never stop dancing.
Yeah.
This is amazing, and I was so adamant about how vital it was to like categorize that in
Mm,
my mind as something important to do, as a human. And it's adorable because I still really use dance a lot to bring me out of my stuckness. And
yes.
I feel like it's that 7-year-old girl reminding me, this is what you need. Like you told yourself you would never forget it. Like,
Oh,
don't forget it.
that's so sweet. I love dancing as well. I can't say that I'm amazing at it, but it again, it was one of those
Same.
things
I'm
I
not
loved
good. I just
doing.
like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I loved doing it as a kid. I remember my mum going,
Yeah.
"Oh, there she goes again, dancing away."
Yes.
It's just so interesting to see because again, I think there is such a misconception that highly sensitive equals crying,
Yeah, I know.
and I
I had to
know
tell a doctor that recently. Yeah.
and I know that is part of it. I know that I cry at more probably things than other people do in such a happy way as well. Like I can
Yeah.
cry tears of joy at a throw of a hat just as much as I can do the other side. So I know that is part of it. But I love the fact that we're uncovering here something that's so much more interesting and so much more detailed here that is
And
such a big part of being highly sensitive that so many people don't realize.
I agree. And like to tie it back to the feeling of being alive, what is the very first thing you did when you became alive? You
Hmm.
cried. You cried. And so it is the primal experience of being human to cry. And I think that's why highly sensitive people are quick to cry. We're happy tears, right? We're bittersweet tears. Sometimes I just look at my children's eyes and I see like the depth of their soul and I cry.
Yes,
Right?
yes,
What is that emotion?
absolutely.
Right? Of like awe,
Yes,
tears of
yes.
awe. Tears of awe. And like you have to explain to your kids when they're like, Mommy, you okay? Like they get
Yeah,
all
you're like,
nervous,
I'm
like, are
fine.
you okay? Yeah. But I think that is part of what we are seeking as highly sensitive people. It is the feeling of being alive.
Mm. Oh, this is such a good conversation. And the
Mhm.
other thing that I wanted to talk about, because you brought it up then, I know you brought it up earlier, is the importance of somatic practices.
Mhm.
And I know this was such a missing piece for me. And I did qualification in
Right.
trauma informed practice because I wanted to understand more about how trauma sat in the
Yeah.
body and how to process it. And I know that dancing is a huge part of that. Would you just
Yeah.
expand on how you see this working with yourself, but also with your clients? Like what is a somatic practice?
I'll take an umbrella word first about embodiment, and then I'll plug in the somatic practice
Hmm.
because I think for me, the way I use it, and these are somewhat interchangeable. I think that's why we can use them both. But the way that I tend to verbalize embodiment as the umbrella is in a similar way to how we all used the phrase mindfulness to be an
Yes.
umbrella for the last 20 years, right? Like mindful, be mindful, blah, blah, blah. And meditation was a form of mindfulness,
Hmm.
right? So when I say embodiment, it's an umbrella term of just simply being present in your physical body. And one of the ways to do that for me is I plug in a somatic practice. And so a lot of us empaths and highly sensitive people actually are more likely to be disembodied. And I can share a couple reasons about that, but I'm sure your audience will like once I describe disembodiment, they'll be like, "Yep, that's me."
Hmm.
When we're disembodied, we often feel, I'll say how it feels first, and then I'll say why we often, as empaths and highly sensitive people, get that way. But it feels empty. We
Hmm.
feel numb. We feel as if we're dissociated or kind of floating simply, maybe just like a walking head. We're just kind of floating around. We bump into walls a lot. I know you and I joked about that earlier on of like, how do you know you're disembodied? I'm like the
Yeah.
bruises on my body. It's bumping into walls because I don't know where I end and begin.
Yeah.
Um, and also we have a harder time feeling the sensations of joy
Hmm.
in our heart or like sexual arousal in our genitals, or you feel just disconnected to the sensations of your body. Now, why would that be? Because we like to feel alive. Like, shouldn't we, be more like that? And some of us are. But the very first reason that I would give to why a lot of us are disconnected from that is we've either consciously or unconsciously turned it off
Hmm.
because it's too freaking much.
Yeah.
Like when you were raised with, or not even raised, like you grew up with a very sensitive nervous system and you were feeling, the air conditioning come on and you were feeling like you were over smelling the burnt microwaved tea, like you're feeling all of these sensations on your nerves, and you're like, this is too much,
Yeah.
this is too much. And you either consciously were like, I got to shut that down,
Hmm.
or very often more likely unconsciously disconnected a lot of the sensory output input because it was just too much. So
Yeah.
that's often a very big reason. The other one, I'm going to have to use some chakra speak in order to explain it. But when we look at our chakras, and I'll just say there's six. There's a crown chakra, but I'll just say there's six because of this example. When you imagine the rainbow colors going from red to purple, and red is at the bottom, which is your root chakra, and then orange is your sacral chakra, and then your solar plexus is yellow. Those are our bottom three chakras, which I kind of nickname the service to self chakras. And those are the ones that are more connected to your body.
Mm.
Then you go upwards and you have the green heart chakra, and you have the blue throat chakra, and then you have the purple third eye chakra. And those are the service to others chakras, which is what highly sensitive people and empaths are brilliant at.
Yeah.
And so often, as an empath and high sensitivity person, we're using our third eye to scan the room. We're scanning the room. We're scanning everybody. We're being hyper vigilant of what everybody's needs and what everybody at that moment is doing, thinking, and feeling using our third eye. Then our throat chakra, it's our expression chakra. Some of us hold it back because we can't be true, but we often use that throat chakra as a way of being a chameleon to fit into our surroundings. And so we will change our voice and change the way we speak and the way we communicate with others based on our environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then our heart is the compassion and care, and it's self-care too, but mostly for others, right? And well, we are great at that. Empaths are like, let me help you in every possible way because I could feel your pain, so I'm going to stop your pain. And so those three chakras become very strong muscles in ourself as high sensitive and empathic person. But sometimes we disconnect from the lower three chakras, which the solar plexus is our willpower. It's our ambition. It's being able to understand who I am, not as a result of my relationship to someone, which is often the heart, but like who I am as a person, as an individual. The sacral chakra is our senses. So some of us are super active in it, but if they're overactive senses, sometimes we shut it down. It's also our pleasure, our creativity. It's the way that we feel connected to sex and anything sensory, right? The sacral energy. And then the red chakra is our root chakra. It's how we feel grounded and rooted, and how we feel even just embodied in general, just knowing where your body begins and ends. And for those three chakras, it sounds so simple, but a lot of us listening are going to be like, nope, don't have that. Yeah, I don't have that. Yeah, I don't have that. And so what part of my work as a somatic practitioner, especially with highly sensitive people and empaths, is reconnecting us to a lot of those three chakras. Sometimes it's all three, sometimes it's just one out of the three, but oftentimes it's one of those kind of energetic connections to ourselves that's broken.
Mm-hmm.
And we just fix it. We fix it by doing movements. We fix it by doing touch. We fix it by going there. Because I'm a hypnotherapist, we can go there by trance and understand where the disconnect even began. And so that is kind of a way. Sometimes the safety one was trauma, right? Your safety of the root chakra is splintered or wounded because you had trauma in your body. And so you don't feel safe in your body because you didn't actually have a safe experience growing up. Or maybe sometimes you don't trust your body because your body, you may have consciously wanted your body to do something, but it betrayed you. Like maybe you needed to run away in a circumstance, but your body froze, right? Your nervous system froze. Or maybe you needed to be very brave in a circumstance, but your body panicked. And so that consistent lack of trust in our body, or that consistent lack of safety in our body, makes us just disconnect, because it's like, well, why bother?
Yeah.
Why bother with this, meat sack? And so what my job as a somatic practitioner is to get you to feel embodied by creating practices with you using your intuition and your sense of self to create ways to get back in the body that you can feel safe, you can trust it, you can have fun with it. And then eventually maybe you want to push yourself and do something more ambitious, like some kind of exercise. But really most somatic practices are just going inside with a curiosity and then giving yourself some self-soothing or exercise that makes you feel embodied in a way that you trust that is right for you. I hope that summarizes it. That was quite a lot, but I tried my best to be clear there.
No, it absolutely does. And I think the understanding for me, I know, and I'm just sort of sharing this just to help sort of strengthen what you were saying there. I know for me, I remember I'd stopped having panic attacks. Like I'd done the kind of inner work, if you like, I'd had the inner journey, and the panic attacks had stopped, which was great.
Yeah.
But what was left over was the residual things that I'd never had time to look at before, because the panic attacks always took priority.
Good point.
And what was left was a complete disconnect between what I used to call was body and brain, in the
Yeah.
fact that it was very much just, I remember somebody saying to me, well, what does your body want to do? What's your
Right.
gut telling you? What's your gut instinct? And I was like, I have no idea what my gut
Yes.
instinct is. Like, what is
Yes.
that? What does it feel
Yes.
like? Because
Uh-huh.
I had, like you said, that safety element is so important. And I
Really.
think if you've been through anything where you didn't feel safe in your body, you learn to push it away, because
Yes.
we always move away from pain, don't we? So
Yes.
that part of it, and then the highly sensitive part. I've spoken to quite a few people who, experienced so much when they were young and were told, not in necessarily a horrible way, but they would just learn from a very young age it was not okay to show X emotion,
Yes.
that they'd
Correct.
start again to push it away. This is not safe for me to feel. And it,
Yes.
it almost became, and I think it does become for a lot of us, a habit, doesn't it? Of just, this
Yes.
isn't safe for me to feel, let me push it away. And then you grow, and like you said, you want to do, or you come against something where you want to make a change, and you suddenly realize, oh, I need support here because I'm not sure how to
Yes.
make this change.
Yes. And you know, it's so interesting about how to begin. The way I'd like to describe the way I work with clients with somatics is if the spin class or the personal trainer at your gym is university, I am kindergarten. I am kindergarten because you cannot go to university and expect to stay in university if you haven't gone through the basics of even knowing you have a body.
Mhm.
Because I also did that. Like every time I kind of break from my body, and I've had several moments, I have a joke on my website like, "Hi, I'm Dr. Katie Larson, and every few years I forget I have a body." But the reason I make that joke is because I have been connected to my body at different points, even to the as far as I presented at an embodiment conference, an international conference. But then a few years later, got completely disconnected from my body when I was nursing a baby 24/7, and my body was no longer mine.
Mhm.
Right. And in another time of my life, I also, similar to you, like I uncovered some trauma that happened in my body. And I was just like, I got to dissociate from that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
don't want to look at that. And so I really dissociated from my body as well. And if your entry point into the world is intellect, which I think for a lot of us highly sensitive, deep
Mhm.
processing people, my entry point is intellect. I love my mind.
Yes.
Like I would rather you talk nerdy to me
Yes.
than anything, right? Like, and so when our entry point into the world is intellect, oftentimes we want to think our way out of this.
Mhm.
We want to read the book on trauma, but we don't want to actually
Absolutely.
feel where the trauma is
Yes.
in our body and then release it. Because I think that's the thing that people are scared of is the feeling of it.
Mm.
Like I don't want to feel the sensations of the trauma. And I think that's why I like doing both hypnotherapy and somatics, because the hypnotherapy for me, I always give my clients a choice if you want to physically see the trauma or you want to approach the trauma with a metaphor. And for some of us, they're like, I never want to see what happened to me. I just want to heal it. So we go and we do a metaphor, and the metaphor can actually heal the trauma. However, sometimes when you're healing the trauma, like you said, it pulls up some things in your physical body because that's where the trauma was stored, was in
Mm.
the fascia and the organs. It just kind of stayed there. And so I like having that tool of somatics to be able to allow people to then approach the body and sense the sensations in the body and then release them because they just want to be released.
Yeah.
They don't want to be there. They don't want you to feel that tight chest every time you think about that. They don't want your legs to go numb every time you think about that. And so some of the practices, I'll use the chest and the legs as an example. Some of the practices that we use to release the stored trauma are by your intuition, but perhaps you have numb legs because you couldn't run away. And so
Mm.
now every time you think about it, your legs go numb. We make your legs feel sensation again. We give them weight. We give exercises to make them feel empowered, to
Mm.
feel like they can move, to feel like they actually have weight again. Or maybe you have a constricted chest. Every time you think about that one time in third grade that thing happened to you, your chest gets really tight, right? And then that has really affected your posture and different things. We go back to that time and we open the chest and we create sensations to make you feel the opposite of constricted. We expand the chest. We feel what it feels like to actually give yourself the power that you felt like was taken away from you. And that is, it's absolutely, as a practitioner, mind blowing to me, the impact that changing the way we touch, move, and approach our bodies changes our thoughts, our unconscious beliefs, and our behaviors. It's just fascinating. And it works. It really works.
Yes. And I know in my training they talked about the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach.
Mm.
And I think that's just such a wonderful example
Talk
of
about
how
that.
how
Talk about
most
that.
of us, yeah, so how most of us look at things as a top-down approach, which is very much we try and solve things with our mind. So this is where kind of like CBT comes into it. So how can we reframe our thoughts? How can we change it? And this is the journey that I had. So I had, obviously, it's no surprise, I had psychologists and psychiatrists from the age of 10
Yeah.
until I was probably in my 20s, and I'd had countless ones. So I understood
Yeah.
intellectually,
And you can probably speak
logically.
about it because you were probably articulate even then.
Absolutely. So I
Yeah.
knew what was going on. I knew why it was there, but it wasn't doing any, like it wasn't going away. Like, okay,
Yeah. It's like a
I
hamster
can
wheel.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I can think it through. I can do all of these things. And it wasn't until I started the bottom up approach. So the bottom up approach is very much working with your body. And like you were
Yes.
saying, working with your body, and then it starts to influence your mind and your behaviors and your actions and just
And
the
I love,
differences between the two. And I think
yes,
to go a little bit deeper, and you'd know more about this, but it feels like Western society versus Eastern. That's how it feels. Like
a little
Western is
bit,
very top down, and
little bit, isn't it?
I don't
And
know, there obviously is some crossover.
I'll bring in the Eastern approach of the chakras again because when we look at the root, the red root is the lower chakra, and then the sacral, and then the solar plexus, those three that I was mentioning before, those tend to quote unquote come online in the order of human development. So the root chakra is about safety. That's all you need when you're a newborn. That's it. Safety. You need safety. And then your sacral chakra comes online when you're a toddler because that's about fun and creativity and play and senses and feelings, right? And so that comes on, and then you get your willpower, which is your solar plexus, about three, older toddler years. And we've all had a toddler that's had a huge meltdown because their solar plexus came online and I do it my way, right? And so what I find is so fascinating is a lot of the problems that we get through anxiety and depression and stuff like that, they're in the upper chakras. Actually, they're in your mind. You're kind of like, imagining the third eye. You're like imagining what could happen, and the imagination is giving the anxiety. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we go back down into those lower three chakras, the lower developmental ages of ourself as a human, that's where the solution lies. The solution lies in giving yourself safety, giving yourself groundedness, giving yourself like gentle touch, a soft blanket. That's what a baby needs. And I remember in Dr. Elaine Aron's book, when she said, when you become overstimulated as a highly sensitive person, you need to imagine you're a 6-month-old baby. Give yourself something to eat, give yourself something to drink, give yourself rest, and talk nicely to yourself. That's
Yes.
all you need. And so that's the root chakra. And then it's like eventually when you feel safe and you start to trust that your body is actually a safe place, then you can actually bring it up into that enjoyment and that pleasure of the sacral energy of like the little girl dancing in the room, right? And like the playful, like doing art for art's sake, all of the things that the ancient wise men and women told us we needed to cure ourselves are in the sacral chakra.
Mm-hmm.
And then that nice willpower and I am this, I am that of the solar plexus is really helpful when you're ready to push your body, right? And I think a lot of the listeners are going to really resonate with this statement, and I think you might resonate with this as well based on what you said about adrenaline. So many empaths and highly sensitive people don't like exercising because we don't like to sweat and we don't like to feel our heart race because heart racing equals anxiety to us. It feels like you are having a panic attack. And so many of us are really missing the joy of exercise and pushing our bodies to like, not necessarily their limit, even me, I'm like, I don't want to push it to my limit, but just to see what it can do. It's a toy that we can play with. But so many of my clients will say, well, I don't like to make my heart race. I said, well, why not? And they're like, well, because it feels like I'm going to have a panic attack and it feels this exact same. And so it's such a homecoming to our body and the birthright of feeling excited and having fun in our body when we can go from feeling like a racing heart is bad to a racing heart isn't always bad. It can be good and it can be fun. And so I think sometimes just making that journey into that concept can be really beneficial for people.
Yes, I was going to say this earlier because we brought up kind of the dopamine hit that you can get,
Mhm.
especially from exercise, and I've never had that. I've never
Yeah.
experienced it. I do not. I don't
Yeah,
enjoy
like the runner's
cardio.
high. Where's
Yeah,
that coming? I don't have that either.
when they say, "Oh,
Yeah.
but it's such a great," no, no, I'm sorry, it's not such a good feeling. All I think when I'm doing, I did an outrun May, which was running. I think it was about 30 kilometers over the month. And I did that and I pushed myself to do it. And all I just kept thinking as I
Hate
was
it.
running around was, this is horrible. I do not
Yeah,
enjoy this.
same.
And I
Hate
know I'm
running.
not
I
helping
personally hate
myself.
running. And you know what? I think that's what's a really important part about working with a somatic practitioner is you hate running, don't run.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
if you hate running, don't run. What do you like? I like to dance. Last night I went out and danced at a
I
club with some
saw,
friends
yes.
because it was so much fun. And I like to swim because you don't sweat when you swim. And after having two children, I like a sport I can pee while I do it. Like you have to hack yourself.
Yes.
So if you know that you're not going to enjoy something in your body, do not do it.
Hmm.
You move how you move. And if you only move by tapping your foot to dance, and that is just tapping your foot or just swaying your hips a little bit while you cook, that's your jam. That's
Hmm.
who you are. And I think that's what also we have sometimes built into us shame
Yes.
of like, look at nerdy little Katie who couldn't climb the rope in gym class. Shame
Hmm.
of like, oh, I can't do a push-up, therefore I cannot do any exercise in my
Hmm.
life. But it's like one of the great parts about becoming an adult is rediscovering your body and its wants and needs to move. And it
Hmm.
might look really weird. I do a thing called Kai Chi Do. It looks like I'm possessed by a person. Like you're like moving your arms and legs and screaming syllables out at the same time. And it looks so bizarre, but it feels great.
Yes, I
Right.
can
And so it's
imagine.
like becoming okay with that is the way that I want to move. That is the way that I feel good in my body.
Mm. I have leaned into, so I do love weight training. That's my
Brilliant.
thing. I do really enjoy that. I like being in competition with myself. It's very personal.
Yes.
I'm not, because I
Yes.
don't like competition
High
either,
sensitivity. We
which,
don't like
no,
competition. Yeah.
don't like
Because the
competition.
empath side of us, we're like, oh,
Absolutely.
I hope I'm
I'll
just,
let you win.
yes,
You've worked so hard for it. You go.
yes, same.
Um, but I do enjoy weight training, and I've just got into sprint training, which is what you were talking about earlier, which is kind of leaning into something that I would never have done earlier in
Right.
my life because it would have generated a feeling unsafe in my body, and
Yes.
this is generating that panic attack thing. Because as
Brilliant.
I'm getting older, I'm very much aware, my muscles are not
Yes.
going to be as prominent as I grow older, and also I want to make sure that my cardiovascular health is looked after and that I'm just
Yes.
looking after who I am and my
That's
body.
perfect.
And
Yes.
so I thought, okay, I need to do some kind of exercise that's going to get my heart working, but I don't want to do cardio.
Yeah.
I put my,
Not going to a Zumba class anytime soon,
that's
hey?
absolutely
Yeah.
it. So sprint training is doing something like I've done it a couple of times on a cross trainer or on the treadmill where I like walk for a couple of minutes and then sprint
Mm,
for 20 seconds and then
love
go back
it.
to walking. And you know what? I quite enjoy that.
That's brilliant. Yeah, and your body feels safe doing it because it's consistent, it's regular, it knows what's coming next.
That's it.
And
And I,
sometimes that's hacking yourself, right? It's like you
yeah,
know that that is important to you. You don't want to have anything unpredictable or be in the middle of a long run and then your body's like, nope, we're done. And
that's
then you're
it.
stuck. So it's like that's a very perfect thing for someone like you. And that's
Mm.
great that you figured that out on
Yeah,
your own, mind you. I like it when we kind of hack it on our own. I'm
yeah.
like, I'm like you that way. I'm like, I will find out everything that I need, but some people need someone like me to just guide them back to their bodies of
I
like, it's
will,
okay. You're doing
yes.
great.
I
Hmm.
will give credit to it's Kylie Larson actually, another
Oh,
surname.
another
Um,
Larson.
Another Larson, yes. And she was talking about sort of sprint, and I was like, interesting. I don't like cardio. I'll give sprint a go.
I
But
love
it's
that.
my head. I think I can get my brain and my body on board because I'm like, I can do it for 20 seconds. 20 seconds is fine.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant. So smart. And I like to swim, like
I
I
love
said
swimming.
before, because of I don't like to sweat.
Hmm.
And I feel swimming is actually more sensual than exercise because
Mm,
my whole body is being touched by the water. And I like that. I like that sensation.
yeah.
I feel it's very calming to my vagal nerve. And I even like to touch my body while I swim, like in certain strokes, like I touch my hips. And it's like there's something very safe about that to me. Whereas I feel like running, I'm like, someone's chasing me.
Yes,
I said that to a
absolutely.
trainer one time. He's like, why don't you like to run? I'm like, have you ever been chased? And he goes, no. I'm like, well, I have. And I feel like this is the equivalent of being chased. So I'm not
Abs-
into it.
I think it is that. It's not just
Yeah,
running and getting out of breath. It's almost like hyperventilating
yes,
because it's so triggering. Yes.
I
I'm so
agree.
glad that I found somebody on the same wavelength. I did want to just talk about the idea of a quest as well, just very
Yes,
quickly, just to sum up, because I know this is a huge part of what you do in the way that you,
yes,
the perspective that you have around how you support people. So can you just explain what the quest looks like in your work?
yes. So when I meet with somebody, I like to put everything into the framework of a journey, like your life's journey. And in your life's journey, you have smaller quests. And in those little quests, there's like a focus, right? And so sometimes it mimics your life journey, right? Like, so I had talked earlier about like my life's journey, and one of my big themes is education. And so throughout my life's journey, I've had many quests that are all about education and they all look different, but that's the flavor of the
Mm,
quest, right? And so I like to, when I'm meeting someone for the first time, give them that framework or understanding of the life's journey is universal. And it's not that difficult to put our current example of what we're learning and growing through into a little framework of like a mini journey or like what I call a quest. But the reason I do that is, and this is kind of a soapbox moment for me, I think that we have come away from the metaphor of journey in modern times. So, like in ancient times, as I'd mentioned in my intro, one of my specialties in my PhD was understanding ancient mythology
mm,
for a way of describing the way that we go through our lives as humans, and that a lot of what we do as humans is actually quite universal. We all feel pain. We all feel depressed. We all have anxieties. We all have bittersweet emotions. We all have these very universal experiences. We experience grief. We experience love. We have these very universal experiences. And that was very well understood by the ancient people and in still many developing countries and in countries that have a very good oral history that is still quite well understood. But what we have somewhat come away from in the modern society, and this is Eastern and Western, but just the modern society, is the understanding of our life as a journey. And we've kind of pathologized a lot of very
mm.
normal universal experiences. So take trauma, for example. We do have traumas. A lot of us do. We have been we're a very traumatized generation. We've gone through many things collectively and individually. But a lot of the narrative around these traumas are it's a pathology, it's something to be healed, it's something to be fixed, it's something to be um, really approached from almost a professional lens of someone
Mm.
needs to fix you. And I don't approach it that way because I find, as a result of both my life journey and the work that I have done in hypnotherapy through past life regressions and life between lives sessions, is that so much of the traumas and the things that we have experienced in our life are what build us. They are what have created our journey. They are what have created our main character energy. When we look back on so many popular stories, many of the characters in those stories were fed through their traumas, right?
Mm.
Like that almost every Disney movie begins
Yes.
with, the parents dying, and then the child has to, rise up and become themselves as a result. And yes, that's a very weird way of looking at it. I understand that. But it's also a very empowering way. It's a very empowering way to look at the things that are happening to us or that we are going through as a universal experience in our life journey. And not only is it universal, but every human before us has learned how to work with that. Now, does it mean that they always worked with it in a healthy way? Maybe not. Maybe our generation is the way that, we learn how to work through things in a more healthy way. But what I don't like my clients to come away with ever is feeling that there's something wrong with them, that there's something that they need to fix. Yes, you can heal with me. We can heal. That is part of the journey. But we also are going to work with what's occurred in your life journey as fuel. We're going to look at your life's journey as a way to understand what makes you you and what makes you have those superpowers, right? As a sensitive person, we have a superpower. But look, I'm not going to lie and say that I am not a hilarious person. I am very funny because it's a trauma response, right? Like I know that. Like I've had so much things where I've had to fawn people so
Yes.
they wouldn't abuse me, right? But I sure shit love that as a talent of mine and a gift of mine. And I got that gift from going through some really difficult things. And so I will never downplay that gift because I got it in a really yucky way.
Yeah.
And so I like to frame that from the perspective of let's look at your journey and let's look at the gifts that you've gotten as a result of the difficulties of your journey. And let's kind of share some of these universal ideas on why that is really helpful. And so using the framework of journey work helps people understand that a little bit better. And hopefully I articulated that well. I tried to touch on a lot of points there, but really I do a lot of work with the hero's journey and the heroine's journey. And so there's different aspects of our life that kind of really nice and neatly fit into the universal journeys, the monomyth, right? That Joseph Campbell used to call the monomyth, which is the hero's journey. And when we see it from that perspective, you don't feel as alone.
Yeah.
You don't feel as there's something wrong with me. You feel more empowered and you feel like you really can double down on the heroic process of just simply being a human and that you are meant for this work and that you can do it.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And I think what I took from what you were just saying there as well is people go through difficult things. And I think what I'm taking from that is that there are some lovely gifts that come from very difficult situations,
Yeah.
but also that when they're doing the work to maybe look at that, so if they're working with you and they're actually looking at it in more detail, they've got everything they need within themselves as well. It's not like they're getting something externally suddenly put in their brain or put in their body to suddenly make them feel better. When they're working with you, they're actually rediscovering
Right.
a deeper strength within them that's always been there. And so
That's a good way of saying it. Yeah.
does that make
I think the
sense?
benefit, you very well articulated that. I think the benefit of being my friends and I that are also hypnotherapists, we joke that we're the last ditch practitioner. You always go, I get the people that are like, I've tried everything, so I finally decided to come to you. And I think like the benefit of being that is that you get to see what has not worked for so many people. And the benefit of seeing that is that I don't use those techniques. And so one of the ways that people get so frustrated before they come to me is I've been over medicated. I've been in therapy for 10 years. I've, done all of the different techniques and quote, none of them work. But then when you simply reframe this as a journey and a place to understand themselves better and understand their role in the journey, sometimes we don't even realize we're the main character, right? And so when we reframe it in a way to become empowering instead of disempowering and needing an external source to quote, when just by reframing it of like, this is your journey, and let's look at it from a perspective of all of the wonderful things that you have already achieved as a result of being dealt those hands, it really changes people's perspectives about their journey and themselves. And then it ignites within them, or reignites, usually it reignites the spark that kept you going. Because I think so many of us that have had bad things happen to us, especially as highly sensitive people, where we were feeling all of these bad things, like as a child, we dampen our spark, but we had just enough to survive us.
Yeah.
And so it's like, sometimes it's just like fanning that flame when you're an adult of like, okay, you have the spark. It got you through all of this. Now let's brighten it up.
Yeah.
And it is very possible to do that. And also just to really shine.
Yes. Oh, it's such a lovely way, I think, of rounding this up. And if people wanted to come and find you and learn how to have maybe some sessions with you and work with you, how would they go about that? What's the best place to reach you?
Thanks, Kate. I have two ways of reaching me. My website is Growth Quests. So it's plural, growthquests.com. And my handle for Instagram is at Dr. Katie Growth Quests. And you can just reach out. You can follow me on Instagram, or you can, there's a lot of freebies on my website where I have lots of like workbooks and videos and things like that in a section called freebies. If you're just like, I want to know more about this lady, just go to the freebies section. And I work with people from all over the world because I've been all over the world, and I like to keep my contacts everywhere I go. And if you're in the United States, in the state of Florida, I'm in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida. I see inline people as well. But yeah, I feel so grateful for, hopefully I've articulated what I do in a little bit of my understanding of the way that things can work in, self-discovery and self-development. And really, I named my business Growth Quests because it is my belief that that is the only reason we're alive, is to grow. And your definition of growth and my definition of growth is always going to be different, but yours is the right one, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to do the growing by these little journeys.
Yeah.
And when we don't push ourselves into these little journeys, then, you're just kind of floating by. And what would it feel like if you were actually really alive?
Yeah.
Right? You would grow. You would grow in many ways.
I love that. It's so, so important, I think. And I feel would resonate with it a lot of the listeners in terms of being highly sensitive and that seeking side of us. So thank you so, so much. I will make sure the links are in the show notes, and please do go and check Katie out both on her website and on Instagram. And Katie, thank you so, so much for being here. I've loved our conversation. Loved it.
It's been my pleasure, Kate. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'll be back next time with another episode. See you later, guys. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you have any takeaways or any questions, please do reach out to me either through Instagram, LinkedIn or Facebook at Kate Carter Coaching, or you can email me at kate@katecarter.co.uk. I always love to hear your feedback and the things that you have taken from the podcast. If you know of any other highly sensitive people, then please do share this so that I can reach more and support more highly sensitive people to embrace their strengths and gifts. As a thank you, I will pick a winner every month for a free 50-minute coaching session with me. Thank you so, so much.